They left me for dead in that frozen valley. My own unit, my own officers, the men and women I had trusted with my life, whose orders I had followed without question, whose backs I had covered in situations where covering someone's back was the difference between them going home and not going home. They left me. Not by accident, not in the chaos of a firefight where decisions have to be made in seconds and sometimes the wrong call gets made and people live with that. Not any of the things that happen in war that are terrible but explainable, deliberately, with full knowledge of what they were leaving me to. And when I survived, when I walked out of that frozen valley 4 days later, frostbitten and injured and carrying something I had found that I was not supposed to find, the looks on their faces told me everything I needed to know. They had expected a body. They got me instead. My name is Julia Carter. I'm 42 years old. I served 14 years in the United States Army, Special Operations, the kind of work that does not appear in press releases and that requires a level of trust between the people doing it that goes beyond anything most people will ever experience in their lives. That trust, the particular, absolute trust of soldiers who depend on each other in situations where dependence is the difference between life and death, was the thing that was used against me. Because the men who left me in that freezing hell were not just my colleagues. They were my commanding officers. Men with rank. Men with authority. Men with the particular power that comes from being the ones who write the reports, control the narrative, and decide what version of events gets recorded and what version disappears, and what they needed to disappear. The reason they had left me there was something I had seen. Something I had picked up from the ground in the aftermath of an operation that had not gone the way the official report would later describe. A drive, small, ordinary-looking, containing information that, as I would discover over the following weeks, was worth considerably more than my life to the men who wanted it buried. I did not bury it. Let me take you back to the operation. It was a Thursday. I will not give you the location. Some things remain classified regardless of what else I am willing to say. What I will tell you is that it was a joint operation, our unit and another, working in coordination on something that had been planned for weeks at the highest levels. The operation went wrong. Not in the way operations go wrong when the enemy is better prepared than anticipated. In the way operations go wrong when the people running them have interests that are not the interests of the mission. I was on the perimeter. My job was cover, watching a specific approach, ensuring that what was happening in the center of the operation was not interrupted from outside. What I saw from that perimeter was not what I was supposed to see. I saw two of my commanding officers, Colonel Hayes and Major Reeves, meeting with someone who was not part of our operation. A meeting that was brief, deliberate, and clearly prearranged. An exchange. I could not see the details from my position, but the shape of it was unmistakable to someone with my training. Something was given, something was received, and then the operation resumed as if nothing had happened. I said nothing. Not immediately, because in special operations, you do not act on incomplete information, and what I had seen was incomplete. I needed to understand what I had witnessed before I decided what to do with it. What I found on the ground 20 minutes later, in the aftermath, during the sweep, was the drive. Small, black, unremarkable. I picked it up without thinking, the automatic, response of someone trained to collect and preserve anything that might be significant. I put it in my pocket, and that small, automatic action, that instinct of someone who had been trained well and trusted that training, was what saved my life, because someone had seen me pick it up. 4 hours later, in the extraction, in the particular controlled chaos of getting a unit out of a situation that had become more complicated than planned, I found myself separated. Not dramatically, gradually, the kind of separation that happens when a unit moves and the communication breaks down, and by the time you realize what has happened, the distance is already significant, except the communication had not broken down. I know this because I heard them, on a frequency I was not supposed to be monitoring. An old habit. A redundancy I had maintained throughout my career, because redundancy in special operations is not paranoia, it is survival. I heard Colonel Hayes' voice. She picked something up, Hayes said. During the sweep. A pause. Leave her, said another voice. Major Reeves, we move now. I stood in that freezing valley and listened to my commanding officers make the decision to abandon me. Then I started walking. If something just shifted in your chest, stay with me. Subscribe to Silent Revenge Stories right now. Because what I carried out of that valley, and what I did with it, dismantled 2 careers, exposed a network that went higher than anyone publicly acknowledged, and took 14 months, every single one of them worth it. 4 days. That is how long it took me to walk out of that frozen wilderness. I will not detail the specifics, partly because some of it remains classified and partly because the physical experience of those 4 days is not the story. The story is what I was carrying, the drive. I did not have the means to access it in the field. What I had was the knowledge that it existed, that someone had died to keep it from being found, and that the men who had left me in that valley had done so because I had picked it up. That told me everything I needed to know about what was on it. I came out of that cold hell on a Monday morning. A patrol from a different unit found me approximately 12 kilometers from where I had been left. I was treated, debriefed, carefully, by people I had assessed as trustworthy, which in the situation I was in was a calculation I made with extreme care. I said nothing about the drive. I said nothing about what I had heard on the frequency. I said nothing about Hayes or Reeves. Not because I was afraid, or not only because of that, but because I understood, with the clarity that 4 days of walking gives you, that what I was holding required a strategy, not a reaction, a strategy. Hayes and Reeves were senior officers. They had rank, connections, the institutional weight of men who had been in the system long enough to know how the system protects itself. If I walked into a standard debriefing and made accusations without preparation, without documentation, without the kind of evidence that cannot be explained away, I would be the woman who had survived a difficult operation and was making claims that could be attributed to trauma, to stress, to any of the comfortable explanations that institutions reach for when the alternative is too uncomfortable. I needed the drive accessed. I needed to understand what was on it, and I needed to get that information to someone who could not be reached by Hayes or Reeves, or anyone connected to them. I spent 3 weeks in recovery. Genuine recovery. My injuries were real, during which time I was also doing something else entirely. I had a contact. Someone I had known for 11 years. A former colleague who had left the military and moved into federal law enforcement. Someone I trusted with the particular absolute trust of shared history and shared danger. His name was Rodriguez. I called him on day 4 of my recovery, from a phone that was not issued to me, on a line I was confident was not monitored. I need to see you, I said. Not here. Somewhere neutral. And I need you to bring someone who can access an encrypted drive without it being logged. A pause. How serious? Rodriguez said. Leave me in the freezing valley serious, I said. Another pause. I'll be there in 48 hours, he said. He was there in 36. What was on the drive took Rodriguez's contact, a forensic technology specialist whose clearance level I will not specify, approximately 6 hours to access and another 12 to fully document. I will not describe the contents in detail. What I will tell you is that what Hayes and Reeves had been doing, what the exchange I had witnessed from the perimeter had been part of, was significant. Enough that when Rodriguez showed the preliminary findings to his supervisor made 3 phone calls before the end of that day. None of those calls were to anyone connected to Hayes or Reeves. All 3 of them resulted in actions that began within 72 hours. I was not part of those actions directly. I was, technically, still a serving soldier in the investigation that was now underway needed to maintain a separation from me that protected both the process and my safety. What I was told, clearly by Rodriguez, in a conversation that lasted 4 minutes, was this. Stay quiet, stay safe. Do not confront either of them. Let us do what we do. How long? I said. As long as it takes, he said. But Julia, you need to understand something. What's on that drive? This goes higher than Hayes and Reeves. I looked at him. "How much higher?" I said. He told me. I sat with that for a long time. Then I said, "Then take it all the way." "That's what I needed to hear," he said. The investigation took 14 months. "14 months during which I returned to service. Different unit, different posting, arranged quietly by people who understood the situation. 14 months during which I saw Hayes twice at official functions and maintained, with a discipline that cost me considerably, the complete appearance of a soldier who had survived a difficult operation and moved on. Hayes looked at me both times, with the particular expression of a man who cannot understand why something he arranged is standing in front of him. I looked back with the particular expression of a woman who knows exactly what he is waiting for. The arrest happened on a Wednesday morning. I was not there. I had been asked to be elsewhere, a request I honored because I understood its necessity even though every part of me wanted to be in that room. What I was told afterward by Rodriguez, in a call that lasted considerably longer than 4 minutes, was that Hayes had been in his office when they came for him, that he had looked at the agents in the doorway and said nothing for a long moment, that when he finally spoke, he had said one thing. "Carter." Not a question, a recognition. Reeves had been less composed. I will leave it at that. The charges, when they became public, which they did, in the particular way that things at this level eventually become public, were significant. The network that had been operating, the interests it had served, the duration of it, all of it documented, all of it verified, all of it traced back to an exchange. I had witnessed from a perimeter on a Thursday and a drive. I had picked up from the ground on instinct. My testimony, when it was required, which it was given completely. With the same methodical attention I had brought to every other part of this. Every detail, every date, the frequency I had been monitoring, the exact words I had heard. "Leave her. We move now." Those words, spoken by Major Reeves on a frequency he did not know I was monitoring, were entered into the record. I sat in that room and I said them, out loud, and I watched the people across the table write them down. And something that had been sitting in my chest since the moment I heard them in that valley, released. Not completely. These things do not release completely, but enough. Rodriguez and I have dinner occasionally. We do not talk about the case. There is not much left to say about it. We talk about other things. The things that people who have known each other for a long time and been through something significant together talk about when the significant thing is finished. Ranger, I should tell you because you may be wondering, is not my dog. That is a different story. But I have a dog now, a 3-year-old Labrador named Duke who has absolutely no interest in anything classified and whose only operational concern is whether it is time for his walk. It usually is. Here is what 14 years and 4 days in a freezing valley and 14 months of waiting taught me. The people who leave you for dead are counting on you staying dead. They are counting on the harsh wilderness finishing what they started. They are counting on you being too broken, too isolated, too far from help to do anything but disappear. Walk out of whatever valley they have left you in. Carry what you found, and find the right people to give it to. The rest, if what you are carrying is real, and if the people you give it to are the right ones, will take care of itself. They left me in that freezing valley. I walked out. I carried what I found. And 14 months later, on a Wednesday morning, in an office I was not in, a man said my name. Not as a question, as an answer.